check out the groundbreaking documentary at reparationsnowdoc.com. That's reparationsnowdoc.com. You don't want to miss out on this one. Out now. Also, go to our store, etnmediagroupstore.com. That's etnmediagroupstore.com. You can get your latest gear, your reparations now. You can get your cut the check, policy over party, and a lot more. Just go to etnmediagroupstore.com right now. As always, thank you for your support. We really appreciate you. Please like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell. And as always, peace and reparations.
Implementation. As we move through the legislature and the governor's office, we lay out our multi-year reparations initiative with a simple plan: acknowledgement, apology, action. Acknowledgement of the harms based on the perpetuation of slavery, as well as the systemic racism and discrimination sanctioned by our state. A formal apology for those harms. Finally, yet importantly, the actions our state needs to address those harms. We recognize the constraints surrounding us and pressing against us. The budget environment, the constitutional framework, both state and federal, public sentiment. We are aware. I like Amanda Gorman's words in her poem, The Hill We Climb. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promised glade, the hill we climb. If only we dare, it's because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It is the past we step into and how we repair it. We are standing here to fulfill the true meaning of the word reparations, to repair. It involves a comprehensive approach to dismantling the legacy of slavery and systemic discrimination. The bills you will hear about today encompass our 2024 reparations legislative priorities package. This is a massive undertaking, so you can expect a package year after year until our work is done. Some will be systemic in nature, some will require direct investments in people or communities. All will require the support of the legislature and the governor. My colleagues will go through the 2024 bills in more detail, and once complete, we will open it up for questions. I'll pass it over to my colleague, Assemblymember Dr. Weber, to start with the acknowledgement of the harms, ACA 135.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Akila Weber, represent the 79th Assembly District in San Diego County. And I am here to discuss ACR 135, which affirms the finding of the California Reparations Task Force in regard to the harms done to Black Californians over the course of California's history. The report states, quote, "America's wealth was built by the forced labor of trafficked African people and their descendants, who were all bought and sold as commodities. Americans' government at all levels allowed or participated in exploiting, abusing, terrorizing, and murdering people of African descent so that mostly white Americans can profit from their enslavement." End quote. This is stuff that we already know. But the question that we had here is, what role did California play? Because before we can even start to address harm, we must discuss if harm even occurred here in the state of California. And the reparations report did a masterful job of researching and reporting the role that this state played. Although California joined the Union in 1850 as a free state, pro-slavery individuals held a great deal of power and influence that shaped our legislature, our state court system, and our representatives in U.S. Congress. To highlight a very few examples, in 1852, California passed and enforced a fugitive slave law that made us more pro-slavery than most other free states. California did not ratify the 14th Amendment until 1959 and did not ratify the 15th Amendment until 1962. In 1874, California Supreme Court ruled that segregation in schools was legal. This was 22 years before the U.S. Supreme Court case of Plessy versus Ferguson. And today, California is the 6th most segregated state in the country for African American students. Operating under a state law for urban development, San Francisco declared that a predominantly black neighborhood of Western Addition was blighted and therefore destroyed the Fillmore, San Francisco's most prominent African American neighborhood and business district. The Ku Klux Klan was allowed to establish chapters all over this state, and many elected officials were members. In the 1920s in Los Angeles, the mayor, the district attorneys, and police officers were all members of this terrorist organization. Our state enacted policies to prevent black Californians from living in certain neighborhoods, from testifying against white men in court, and from interracial marriage. And as stated, this is just a few findings reported in the task force and affirmed in ACR 135. ACR is not only a resolution to affirm the task force, it is also meant to educate ourselves about our history of California. I.D.B. Wells stated, "The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them." The Reparations Task Force turned the light of truth, and this is laid out in ACR 135. This is the foundation upon which we will build for this year and years to come. I'm happy to report that this resolution passed the Assembly Judiciary Committee yesterday and will be presented on the floor this upcoming Monday. I will now turn it over to my colleague, Assemblymember Reggie Jones-Sawyer, to discuss the formal apology. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Weber. I'm Assemblymember Reggie Jones-Sawyer, representing the 57th Assembly District, South Central Los Angeles. And I want to thank Dr. Weber for stating the case for why we have to have reparations. In any apology, you have to acknowledge the harms that you've done. It's hollow in any apology unless you actually state why you're apologizing, not only for the people inside this room, but also the people outside this room to acknowledge it. Otherwise, you're complicit in the crime that has been foisted on African Americans for centuries. America's original sin is the genocide and enslavement of human beings. America's second greatest sin is watching it happen and pretending that it never did. From the moment the settlers set foot on this fertile land, we all became entangled in a system that made winners and losers, rich and poor, haves and have-nots. From our country's inception, you were an owner or you were a slave. No one chose to be a slave. No one chose to be chained to another slave and forced to clear brush from the slave behind you so you could till the dirt so that another slave could plant seeds for the owners to eat food. No one chooses this. Thousands upon thousands of Africans were plucked from their homes, shoved into the bottom of a ship and brought here to build a dream that none of them would ever take part in if they remained alive at all. When California joined the Union, it did it by claiming to be a free state. Take that in. We claim to be a free state, F-R-E-E, free. Then we discovered gold. You know what trumps free? G-O-L-D. After that, it was off to the races. This legislature allowed slave owners to bring their enslaved property so long as they arrived here before 1850. Then the California State Supreme Court said slave owners are okay as long as they only stay temporarily. That's not freedom. Slavery is one of the state's negative marks, and we must begin the process to atone for our role in that system. On Friday, I introduced AB 3089 to finally begin that atonement, to finally begin what we want to call the process of healing. This is not a document to shame anyone. This is about to finally heal this state, and ultimately this country, this nation, and ultimately the world on the enslavement of African Americans. The task force started the conversation, and Dr. Akila's resolution outlines the harms presented by the task force. My bill writes the apology and will enshrine it, ultimately enshrine it here in this Capitol for all to be able to see what we've done and to be able to take that to other parts of the world. Before we do anything, the state must apologize for perpetuating these human rights violations, because that's what slaves were, humans with no rights. Our apologies aren't perfect, and it can't stand alone. I'm calling on the community to review the apology and reach out to my office to provide input. This is a labor of love for everyone standing here that will live on as state law once it is signed by the governor, so that we want to hear from everyone. Now then, I'll turn it over to Dr. Corey Jackson to talk about his bills. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assembly Member Dr. Corey Jackson, the 60th Assembly District. It's important to understand that in our efforts to right the wrongs of California's past atrocities and racist policies that have oppressed black people socially and economically since the inception of this state, we are presenting reparations in all areas of our civil society that represents more than just cash payments. But why must we do this? We must do this because, number one, we have to understand that in order to do some of the most innovative and some of the most targeted reparations legislation, we must first clear the path of any legal barriers that exist within our Constitution. One of the chief among those is Proposition 209. The 1996 law that raised a legal barrier that does not allow us to help people of color because they are simply people of color. We have to understand that the era of the colorblind society is a failure. If you can't see us, you can't serve us. Why? Because all of the research shows that the best way to serve any group of people who have a common ailment, who have a common issue that they must address, that you must approach them and you must work with them in their own cultural context. Because even the most well-meaning interventions can actually do more harm if they are not done in the cultural context in which the people find themselves. Therefore, ACA 7 would allow for the approval of Proposition 9 to allow us to sidestep Prop 209 by focusing on some of the most pressing issues that are facing people of color. For instance, there are many people of color, specific community, who are ravaged by issues of diabetes, of obesity, of high blood pressure, of poverty. If we are prohibited from addressing these issues from the cultural context of the people who are facing these things, then we cannot make the meaningful progress that we are trying to make. Therefore, we are seeking to revise or amend Prop 209 to ensure that we can increase the life expectancy of some of our most marginalized and oppressed populations, that we can lift people out of poverty, which California created policies and structures to ensure that certain people are in poverty, and to finally deal with, in a targeted and more meaningful way, the gross and despicable issues facing Black students when it comes to their educational achievement. ACA 7 is an opportunity to make sure that California no longer has to look past proven ways to help communities facing the greatest inequities in health outcomes, education, and poverty rates. We also have a part of our reparations package, ACA 8, that is authored by our chair, Assemblymember Wilson. ACA 7 would remove the exception of involuntary servitude from our state constitution and declare that all forms of slavery is prohibited. Californians must understand that the Golden State allows for slavery to happen today. Today, slavery takes on the modern form of involuntary servitude, including forced labor in prisons. Slavery is wrong in all of its forms, and California should be clear in denouncing that in the Constitution. This is good. I wish I wrote this. California is among only 16 states with an exception clause for involuntary servitude in its state constitution. Most recently, voters in Alabama, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont removed involuntary servitude language from their state constitutions. California is not leading the way. Incarcerated people have long faced crucial treatment for any work absences. This includes physical violence, solitary confinement, denial of phone calls and family visits, and limiting participation in self-help groups and disciplinary write-ups that result in longer prison terms. Such punishments or threats of such punishments are often used even when absences are due to illness or injuries sustained through the work. This sounds like the instances that our ancestors faced on those tobacco and on those cotton fields. The legacy of slavery and forced labor runs deep in California's history. From the exploitation of indigenous people in Spanish missions to Black slaves forced to mine for gold, we have the opportunity to take a step in the direction towards ending that legacy. And now it's my great honor to bring up Senator Stephen Bradford.
Thank you, Assemblyman Jackson. I, along with Assemblymember Reggie Jones-Sawyer, spent 2 years on the Reparations Task Force, and if there was anything that was clearly documented and highlighted, was the racially motivated taking of property all across the state and even this nation from African Americans. And just like the legislation I authored 3 years ago to return Bruce's Beach to the Bruce's family that was racially motivated and taken, SB 1050 will provide a broad pathway to justice for others harmed by the racist policies and the practices of distant and recent past. Many African Americans here in California and across this nation were denied the opportunity to prosper and build generational wealth as a result of racial bias. Please understand, generational wealth is through land ownership, it's through home ownership, and we were denied that. We must remove that shame can make it right. In California, government officials abused the power of eminent domain by using it to destroy homes and move people off of their land, out of their neighborhoods. This was often based solely on race. And we had plenty of examples during the task force 2 years. San Francisco, Oakland, Palm Springs, Coloma, San Diego, and Russell City. And we just recently saw last week on the news in Santa Monica about Silas White, an African American who bought property in Santa Monica, started a African American beach club, and his property was taken for the purpose of making a parking lot that was never built. Similar to the Bruce's Beach property, it was for a park that was 40 years before a park was ever on that land. One example again is in my district, the 105 freeway. Over 3,500 African Americans were displaced, 117 businesses were displaced for a freeway. My music teacher, as an elementary student, his home was taken in 1970 for this freeway. The real harm, it's real harm, I should say, and these folks deserve to be compensated. And let's be clear, California and America has stolen and taken more from the African Americans than we ever burned and looted. I'm also asked to talk about AB 1815 by Assemblymember Weber, which would expand the Crown Act, as you well know. Former Senator and now Supervisor Holly Mitchell authored that bill in 2019, and it would prohibit amateur sports clubs and organizations from discriminating against anyone on the basis of race associated with their hair texture and protective hairstyles. The original Crown Act protected students and employees. However, many children compete in non-school affiliated athletic programs and sports clubs, and adults participate in amateur sports and leagues on a voluntary basis, and 1815 would extend the Crown Act to protect those individuals. So now I have the opportunity to introduce Assemblymember Font.
Good morning. I'm Assemblymember Mia Bonta, representing proudly California's 18th district, which includes the beautiful people of Oakland, Alameda, and Emeryville. I'm also chair of the Assembly Health Committee this year. I appreciate you all being here today as we share our reparations bill package as a collective and together. The Black Caucus is moving forward with two health-related reparations proposals this year, AB 1975, which I am authoring, and SB 1089 by Senator Smallwood Cuevas. Both of these proposals address food injustice because you cannot fight for justice when you do not have the sustenance in order to be able to do that. As we know, Black households disproportionately experience food insecurity and disproportionately experience highly limited access to affordable, nutritious food. Unhealthy options like sugary drinks, processed foods, and fast food is too easily available in our communities and cleverly marketed towards our communities. These historical legacies of redlining and other forms of discrimination is a central cause of food injustice. Our markets have been taken away from us, our local farms have been decimated, our ability to access food that we know is healthy is destroyed. These legacies have created unfavorable social determinants of health, making Black Californians more susceptible to conditions like diabetes and high blood pressure. To combat this, the Reparations Task Force recommended improving access to nutritious and affordable foods. My bill, AB 1975, will make medically supportive and nutritious services under Medi-Cal a permanent benefit for all recipients. These services include medically tailored meals, food pharmacies, and the produce prescriptions for managing or reversing diet-sensitive health conditions. Areas like Stockton and Alameda County, who have implemented their own versions of these programs, have reported improvements in managing diabetes, being more comfortable with and excited about cooking with new healthy foods, and orienting around culturally appropriate and concordant foods. By covering medically supportive food and nutritious services, AB 1975 aims to promote health equity and reduce healthcare costs. The task force also highlighted that one of the harms facing African American communities in California is the lack of access to grocery stores and supermarkets. In fact, we are more likely to be able to find a liquor store in our communities than we are a supermarket. White neighborhoods on average have 4 times as many supermarkets as predominantly African American neighborhoods. SB 1089 by Senator Small-Cuevas addresses food injustice by requiring advance notification to community stakeholders prior to the closure of a grocery store in underserved or at-risk communities. Because when you close a store, when you close the ability for people to go in and shop healthily and shop in an empowered way, you reduce their ability to be able to live. It's that plain and simple. This bill seeks to remedy the harms from disruptions in access to food and provide meaningful information to community members. Nutrition plays a quintessential role in people's overall health. Our health package marks a significant step towards rectifying health disparities and advancing repair and justice for Black and African American communities in the state of California. And with that, I have the honor of bringing up our Assembly Member McCarty, who will talk to our education package.
Good morning. I'm proud to be here in unison with our 12-member legislative Black Caucus, focusing on the 3 A's, acknowledging, apologizing, and action. And this will be our work this year and going forward. Certainly education is front and foremost an issue for Black Californians. We know first that we are many times first in issues like the criminal justice system, that we find in homeless facilities throughout Sacramento and California. We also know that access to early education, to preschool, after-school programs, advanced placement programs in K through 12, and certainly higher education, we are certainly way down on the list. So we know that we have a budget situation we need to address, but it doesn't mean we're not going to act. And we have to put forward real plans. This is an opportunity to expand career education in California, focusing on our existing budget allocations by requiring that districts in proportionally red line neighborhoods focus on career education for the kids need the most. So we're going to flip the redlining issue on its face. So we know that redlining, of course, was a systemic denial of services such as mortgages, insurance loans, other financial services to residents in certain areas based upon race. So we're going to use those exact same areas and focusing on state education programs for those same families and communities. We're going to make sure that we defend the program in the budget a couple of years ago that we have for the $300 million block grant for the highest performing subgroup to making sure we focus on Black students throughout California. But career education really is about economic development and a pipeline for high wage jobs. And too often reports show that in these neighborhoods, they have second-class, low-quality vocational programs, really the continuation of Jim Crow era segregation. So a few years ago, we created new programs in here, new CTE programs focusing on the best of the best, strong workforce program, the career education incentive program. This will make sure that these are focused on these neighborhoods where students and young people can meet them the most. So this is our opportunity to move forward with an education agenda that focuses on upward mobility, because we know this is 70 years this May from the landmark decision of Brown versus the Board of Education, which says that education should be equal to everybody. But we know 70 years later that it is not. So this 2024 is our year of action, and I'm proud to be pushing forward this measure with our caucus. And with that, I would like to bring up my colleague from the Los Angeles County area, Mike Gibson, to talk about criminal justice and business issues.
Thank you very much. Good morning to each and every one of you. I feel that this morning that Martin King Jr. is standing with us. I feel that Frederick Douglass is smiling on us. Dr. Charles Drew, Rosa Parks, and the list goes on and on. The responsibility that these 12 members have today to change the trajectory of California, change the course of righting the wrongs of this state. We stand in John's shoes today, and I am absolutely thrilled and excited to stand with each member of the California Legislative Black Caucus, because the mantle is weighing on their shoulders for us to change the trajectory for generations to come in California with the work that we're doing here today. And so I stand proudly and boldly with each man and each woman that's here today that represents the legacy of other members of the Legislative Black Caucus. I'm excited today, but we have a task. So I'm Mike Gibson. I represent the 65th State Assembly District. Those are areas of Watts Willowbrook, where I was born and raised, Compton, Carson, North Long Beach, Harbor Gateway, North and South, Harbor City, Wilmington, and San Pedro. Because I did that so that you can understand the African Americans in which we all represent in the state of California. And we're proud to represent those African Americans and those communities. It is important that we first recognize the state of California's effort to combat the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion in this state. However, we continue to progress. We are witnessing the effects of the long-standing institution of slavery and how that impacts our communities. And in the growing economy, it is critical that impacted communities are given the best possible opportunity for stable communities and success. Currently, according to the United States Department of Labor, Black Californians earn, watch this, 72 cents for every dollar earned by our white counterparts. The piece of evidence that serves as proof of this long-standing consequences of slavery. It is imperative that we take further measures to address the inequalities and expand the opportunities for growth and professional development. This is why I'm proud to introduce Assembly Bill 2862. This bill expands the priorities of African American applicants seeking occupational licenses in this state of California. It will serve as a necessary and a much needed gateway for the broken of the historic racist barriers. We must continue to champion legislation that combats these racial barriers and expand not only the opportunities of African Americans, but also for the outcomes of success. California has spearheaded the evolution of advancement, and I am proud to be part of that as a member of the California Legislative Black Caucus. I take great pride in our state's prioritization of inclusion. However, our work is far from done as we affect slavery and take it on, and systems that will continue to perpetuate slavery in our society. Again, I am proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with members of the California Legislative Black Caucus, and I want to continue on by acknowledging the next speaker who will talk about criminal justice, Mr. Chris Holden.
Good morning. Don't let my passion be seen less than my colleague if I don't speak as powerfully as he has. But let me just say that this is my 12th year as a member of this legislative body and a member of this Black Caucus. And even within this legislative body, we have seen this caucus grow. And when you look at the members who represent the California Legislative Black Caucus, it's not like in the old days where it was either Oakland or Los Angeles. You have members representing all of California. So we represent African Americans, and we represent them proudly. But we also know that we have other citizens in our community who are learning about the experience that African Americans have been through and continue to be subjected to. And so as Senator Bradford and my colleague in the Assembly, Reggie Jones-Sawyer, we are not going to be here to see the long haul of this good work that's initiating here under the task force and under this caucus and this bill package. But we will be here whenever they need us to be able to support and join in and continue to see the momentum move forward. The California Legislative Black Caucus's reparation package addresses historic and ongoing injustices inflicted upon descendants of enslaved Africans, and criminal justice reform remains a priority. Black people are incarcerated at a strikingly higher rate than white people in jails and prisons across the country. In California, black people are incarcerated at a rate of 9.5% higher than white people. I'm here today to speak on two bills that ensure incarcerated persons are treated humanely and that rehabilitation remains the top priority. Assembly Bill 280, solitary confinement. Solitary confinement is one of the most severe and destructive practices found in today's detention facilities. The current consensus among mental health experts, human rights organizations, and the United Nations is that prolonged solitary confinement amounts to torture. The National Commission on Correctional Health Care states that a period of confinement beyond 15 consecutive days is inhumane, degrading treatment, and harmful to an individual's health. There is currently no state law that sets clear standards and limits on the use of solitary confinement in detention facilities. AB 280 provides a clear definition of what constitutes solitary confinement across all facilities, sets limits on how it can be used, and provides examples of alternatives to solitary confinement when individuals need to be housed individually. Additionally, this bill ends the use of solitary confinement for designated populations, including people who are under 25, are pregnant, 60 years of age or older, or have serious disabilities. AB 280 focuses on the treatment of incarcerated people. The next measure that I will present today is AB 1986, which ensures incarcerated people have access to materials to connect them to the outside world. AB 1986 banned prison books. This is authored by Assemblymember Isaac Bryant. Prisons use book bans as tools to limit access to education and impact nearly 2 million people incarcerated on any given day across the nation. In California, CDCR bans books they deem not to be in the penological interest of the state and with great inconsistency. CDCR processes what books, articles, and other pieces of information it bans is not public, and that they are not required to publicly post a list of their banned books. Today, there is no transparency and accountability with California's process to ban books. The books currently banned seem to be disproportionately written by black authors, activists, as well as other authors of color. AB 1986, by my colleague Isaac Bryant, would require the Inspector General to post a list of materials that have been banned by the Department of Correction and Rehabilitation on the office's internet website. Most importantly, it would authorize the Inspector General to review materials to determine whether there is a legitimate reason for the item being on the banned materials list, and authorize the Office of the Inspector General to remove books from the list if they were banned simply because the authors were black. There's a known fact that the criminal justice system disproportionately impacts the black community. CLBC remains committed to creating a more just system by ensuring liberty and justice for all means liberty and justice for all.
I am proud to stand in this moment with my colleagues from COBC who are doing amazing works on a broad variety of issues. I am also proud, and we as a caucus are proud to have Assemblymember Dr. Jasmine Bain standing with us in solidarity as she comes from a community that knows what it's like to feel systemic racism and discrimination impact them and hold them back. Today is a day, as was stated, that we are working towards a brighter future for every single Californian. Because if you touch the lives of Black Californians, if you touch the lives of African Americans, you touch the lives of everyone in California. We will not be left behind. And so that's why it's important that we have ACR 135, which deals with the awareness piece. It is important that we have the bill 3089. Where's mine? Now I'm trying to remember what the number is. Your apology.
Yes.
3089, thank you, staff. 3089 that deals with the formal apology, and you see a host of bills on action. And as was stated, the work is not done today. The work will not be done at the end of 2024. We will do this work, and although we have members of the Black Caucus leaving us, passing the torch to this next generation, just think that all the other members have at least about 10 years left. So we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. It is a massive undertaking, but we will get the job done. We now like to open it up for questions. You can ask a general question and various members may answer, but you can also identify a particular member who you'd like to ask a question to. So I open the floor.
Assemblymember, you mentioned that you don't expect all the work to be done this year, but if we're back here on August 31st, what would success look like for this bill package in 2024?
I would say success looks like our priority package getting done. And I will note that there are almost 30 bills related to the Reparations Task Force recommendations that are being introduced by various members up here. We've selected 14 that are our priority, and we want those to get across, and I would expect some other ones to get across the finish line as well. But part of this is about introducing bills to have the conversation. So many of our colleagues need to be educated on why California. Things that are laid out in ACR 135. It was in Judiciary Committee yesterday, and a colleague of ours noted that when you look at the first half of California history, it looked terrible, and admittedly so. But when you look at the second half of California history, it talked about things that we had done right. Just because we do something right doesn't negate the fact that harm was done, and we have to address that harm through action. So success in August 31st at the end of session looks like our priority packages across the line plus a few more. I saw a question over here and then over here.
Yeah, I had a question for Senator Bradford about SB 1050, the unjust property takings bill. So the bill says that the chief financial officer within the Freedmen Affairs Agency would investigate complaints from families who say that their property was seized without just compensation and was taken through racist or discriminatory means. So can you talk about how the state would determine if property was seized through racist or discriminatory means? What would be the criteria for
I mean, this still is a work in progress as we build this out. I mean, so we haven't put all the pieces together, but it would be a governmental agency, whether it's called the Freedmen's Bureau or whatever, that would help in determining and looking at historically where property was taken. Again, it's plenty of examples. Again, Section 14 in Palm Springs right now is being well documented. What I just stated about Santa Monica is being well documented. So it's there. It's now just working, having an agency that's going to be responsible for putting this all together, just like genealogy, and assisting folks in being compensated for that.
Is that something that might end up being included in the bill if it's amended later on, like what exactly that means for it to be racist?
Again, it's a work in progress, so if amendments are required to help shape this and put meat on the bones, we're willing to do that. Yeah.
I do have a question.
Hold on 1 second, let me here and then here. Right here, ma'am.
Yes, good morning, thank you. This is a two-part question, probably for you, Chairperson and Vice Chair Senator Bradford, please. Would there be any budget requests forthcoming for the funding of any of these current reparations bills that you're putting forth? And secondly, we heard that there is a 3-year plan for reparations bill. when in this 3-year plan can we expect legislation for direct monetary payments? Thank you.
Thank you. So a number of our bills do include, have a fiscal component. And so those have been introduced recognizing that we are in a budget deficit of historic proportions in comparison to where we were when the interim draft report came out. And so we recognize that. And as we work through the legislative process, we'll prioritize those with fiscal ask, recognizing the environment that we're in. We have a number of budget priorities from last year, which we worked with the governor to be able to include in his January budget. And we're continuing to fight for those to be included in the May revise. We noted in the LAO report, every single budget priority that we had from last year was actually listed as an option from LAO to defund, basically to satisfy the additional $15 billion that was noted that is continuing our deficit. And so we will work within the environment we are, and we'll be sure to make sure we work with our colleagues to prioritize investments in Black Californians. As it relates to what is the 3-year plan, we expect, as was, I believe it was stated here, but I know it was stated in a number of interviews, to work through 3 to 10 years to get most of these across the finish line. The 3-year plan comes from the fact that we have this governor remaining for 3 years. And he and his office have been collaborative with us throughout this entire process, and we expect that to continue during his tenure. In regard to direct cash payments to individuals, we will continue to have that discussion as we navigate the next few years. As noted, we are halfway through a legislative session. That means we have about 3 months of the legislative process in each house to work through these existing bills. In our next session, we have 2 years. And during that 2-year session, we will consider over the fall concluding additional payments, whether they be direct cash payments or direct payments to communities. But really, it's going to take us as a caucus considering what is best in the budget environment, as well as we work through the constitutional framework that we exist in that still needs addressing, as Dr. Corey Jackson noted with ACA 7.
Yeah, I think just in response to that question as a whole, I think this has been a longer than a 3-year process already. We are already 200 years late. It's a 400-year process. We have some members of this caucus who are on a 1-year timeline before they term out. And there are a number of us who have nearly a decade. And so this is going to be a framework of legislation that we continue to put forward until all of the work is done. But of course, cash transfers has to be a core part of that conversation. Yesterday, we had a House resolution in the Assembly where we talked about Japanese internment camps here in California and the reparations that occurred thereafter, direct cash compensation. Here in California, we have done cash compensation before for harms. For example, the harm during COVID resulted in a Golden State stimulus check. You all remember the card with the California Golden Bear just a couple of years ago, direct cash to all Californians. We know how to get money out the door to repair harm. We're experiencing the worst budget deficit the state of California has ever had, but make no mistake, we cannot have a full reparations conversation without talking about direct compensation for that harm. But that conversation is ongoing, and a huge, momentous way to keep that conversation alive is to pass this priority bill package this year and to continue to build on that work.
Chair Wilson, will you split on the decision to...
Hold on 1 second. Let me get the gentleman behind you, and then I'll go to you.
Yes, thank you. If you had to rank each legislation that you presented, or most of them, what would be the top 3 priorities? I know we have talked about SB 490, the policies.
So of our reparations priorities package, there are 14. The first one is awareness, which is ACR 135. The second one is apology, which is AB 3089, and then it's all the rest. Simple as that. Yeah.
My last question too, you got 80 assembly members, you have 40 senators. How would you navigate, to build a relationship with them to get them to understand and educate and support these legislation?
Well, although we have 80 assembly members, we need 41. And we have, 40 senators, we just need 21. And so we will work to build a coalition around this, ensuring we educate our colleagues on this subject. They were all given the final report last June. We hope they are taking time to read it and digest it. But we also have an education tour planned led by Assemblymember Tina McKenna, who will work to ensure we not only educate members of our colleagues, but other members of the public as well. We have our State of Black California tour and conversation that is led by Senator Lola Smallwood-Cuevas that will work to galvanize the community around these particular subjects and ensure that not only are our legislators informed, but the members in their district are informed as well. And we know that part of the work of a legislator is listen to their constituents. So we want to make sure our constituents are educated so they can speak out to their legislator. Here, here, and here.
Thanks for taking our questions. I'm just curious, was the caucus split on the decision to not introduce legislation this year that would give out cash payments? And did the governor give you a heads up or directly talk to the caucus about not doing that this year?
So I'll bring over Assemblymember Bryan again to address, but I'll start with the caucus is united or unified in our package that we put forth, and we were unified in the bills that we decided to put forth as a caucus. And like I noted, several members of the caucus have introduced bills to start discussions around key components of reparations, and we all have been in the legislature for a moment long enough to know that sometimes it takes multiple conversations for our colleagues to get where they need to be able to vote in support of our reparations package or measures in general.
I think the chair focuses, we are unified. There are 12 black members in the entire state legislature. There have been less than 70 black members who have ever served in this building. There were some early black members in this building who weren't allowed to stay in hotels in Sacramento even after they were sworn into this building. And so we're very cognizant of the legacies we stand on and the work that we have to do. And so we, of course, can unify. And the governor has been a very willing and able partner to talk through this package. We met with him as recently as last week. The community's calls for immediate direct compensation are not lost on us. The pragmatic realities of governing and legislating in the largest budget deficit in the history of California is also not lost on us. We also know that the budget crisis of today is not necessarily the budget crisis of tomorrow. It certainly wasn't the budget crisis of yesterday when we had a $100 billion surplus. And so we've got our work cut out for us, but we're committed to doing that together every step of the way.
I think it's very important that we understand when we talk about cash payments, the systemic environment that we find ourselves in. Today, if a upper middle class parent has a child, the likelihood that that child would stay in the upper middle class is very slim. Just because one generation in our current systemic environment in this nation and in the state, right now, just because one generation makes it, the environment right now does not allow for all future generations to continue to make progress. So the question becomes, if we're going to honor our ancestors, which is always about the next generation, not just about me, it's about us and our children. What good is a cash payment if it's only going to benefit one generation? Right? And so which is why part of our package, we have some systemic constitutional amendments, some things, again, one of the cornerstones of our reparation package is to clear the way of legal barriers, of systemic barriers, to ensure that if the work we do now will last another 100 years. And so, we hear you. I want some money right now. But the question becomes, will our grandchildren benefit from me getting that money?
Yes.
So we are trying to also honor our ancestors and the wisdom that they have brought forth to ensure that we are doing right And sometimes doing what's right doesn't mean doing what's immediate. And so we are going to take our time, and we are going to make sure that the work that we do here lasts far longer than our time on this earth.
Thank you. There, and then there.
Thank you. As we all remember, the hurdles that ACA, this is regarding indentured servitude and slavery in prisons. ACA 3 faced pushback from the Department of Finance saying that it would cost, removing slavery from the Constitution would cost too much. Is ACA 8 facing that same pushback, and should removing slavery have to be justified from arguments that it costs too much?
Involuntary servitude is a loss of human dignity. Our current incarcerated persons are experiencing a loss of human dignity. I am an accounting person. That is my background, accounting and finance. I care about the dollars and cents.
Well,
But when it comes to human dignity, dollars and cents don't factor in. Simple as that. So yes, there are conversations surrounding it, and we are getting from our colleagues the same conversation, from some of our colleagues, the same conversation that then Senator Sidney Comlander Dove had. But we will overcome that, because at the end of the day, dollars and cents cannot matter when it comes to human dignity.
Thank you.
Thank you. So here, and then there, and then there.
Yeah, can you please talk about how you all arrived at this particular bill package, how you selected these priority bills, and then, I mean, the task force had hundreds of recommendations, so, and if there's going to be a 10-year effort, do you have an estimate of how many bills might come out of this report?
Right. Dr. Jackson, Dr. Weber, either one of you.
as we began to look at it, we formed a committee to look at all the recommendations. And at first, we whittled down over 100 recommendations on the task force to about 30-something, and then 30-something on down. And the idea is what could be done now. And I think as you continue to see more LAO projections, that we are a very wise caucus when it comes to making sure that we maintain a sense of discipline on ensuring that we just don't do something that don't have anything to show for it. But then also making sure that we understand that if it's in the task force recommendations, they're all important, right? It's like saying what scripture is not important in the Bible, right? They all are. And we wanted to make sure that they covered a wide range of issues. And as you see, we have done that, whether it's education, whether it's health, whether it's criminal justice, right? Whether it's wealth. But the idea is we wanted to make sure that we covered a wide range of issues, but then we also were cognizant of the barriers that we might face this year, but still move the needle forward, right? Remember, we're setting the foundation this year for all the work that continues on in the process, right? Scripture tells us you got to count the cost, right? Which means that you have to understand what is necessary, what foundation do we need to lay now that will allow for even more success into the future. And I think that's what we've been able to do this year.
I think I'm going to ask a 490 question instead.
Well, I agree with what Assemblymember Corey Jackson said. We were very deliberate in our decisions as a caucus. I also want to highlight what our chair said. These are our 14 priority bills, but there are many members who are carrying other bills that are part of the recommendations from the Reparations Task Force. And I encourage all of you to continue to look at all of our bills and to support, as we will support all of those bills. They're just not a part of the priority. You know, our responsibility is not lost on any of us. And we talked about that a lot when we were deciding which bills we would choose. In addition to, as has been stated, our financial constraints right now, but also the lack of education and the work that we have to do amongst ourselves, amongst our colleagues, and more importantly, amongst Californians. And that's why we are approaching this from a variety of different ways. We're approaching this from, yes, the bills that we have. We're approaching this from the different budget asks that we will have. But the education and communication component is key. Because as someone else stated here, there are 80 members of the Assembly and 40 of the Senate. And we have to get a majority in both houses to vote on these bills so that we can get them to the governor's desk. And that's going to take educating them, that's going to take educating their communities, so that their communities can also put pressure on their members to support these individual things. And so this is really truly laying down the foundation, as so many people have said before. There's a lot of work, there's a lot of misinformation out there. I am a Californian, born and raised, and I thought all these issues happened in the South. I had no idea of the things that California had done, the things that our elected officials had done, the way in which we have been viewed and continue to be viewed in this state. And so there's a lot of education that must be done initially. And so these bills are wide, they touch on a lot of different areas, but it also allows us the ability to have wins coming out so that we don't come out of the gate with a bunch of failures from the beginning based on finances or based on the fact that people are just not aware of the fact that there have been significant harms that have been done and continue to be done to Black Californians. We are aware that everyone in the state is watching us, but also everyone in this nation, but also in this world. Because the discussion about reparations is not one that is specific to California, nor is it specific to the United States. You hear about the African countries talking about reparations as well. And they are looking towards California to make sure that we get it right. And so we are very well aware of that. We do not want to come out of the gate with a bunch of vetoes and losses on the floor, because we know that there's a lot of work that we must do and our individual communities and organizations that support us must do so that we can fully implement all of the recommendations within the next 3 to 10 years. So thank you.
Can I follow up just really quick? How did you all pick the priority bills for the caucus versus what individual members would carry outside of those priorities?
So all of the members, it followed a similar process that we have for our normal priority bills each year. So all of the members submitted their bills to the caucus as a whole. We all looked at them, reviewed them, voted on them, and those that got a supermajority were the ones that were selected.
Was there any criteria or something that the caucus is looking for in particular for the priority reparation?
So as was noted from Dr. Jackson, the members of the subgroup, the policy group, had narrowed the bills down to about 30, recognizing that our caucus, not only is the subject matter broad, but our caucus has a broad, diverse set of skills and passions and focus areas. So we wanted to ensure that every member had an opportunity to submit something that was, or to carry something that was related to their particular passion or skill set. And so everybody submitted bills, so to speak, as these are the bills I'd like to work on within the reparations task force report. And then those were, like I said, reduced by that policy committee. And then of that policy committee, members voted on the ones that they actually wanted to prioritize and put their full forth effort, not only just of co-authoring, principal co-authors, but also in committee, on the floor, with their colleagues, that type of work. Thank you. We have here and then here, and that might be it. Okay. Okay. We're gonna do the floor, because we're at time. But we have here, 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 and then that's gonna be our last. And everybody had a chance to speak already. Go ahead.
Okay, I just have a follow-up to the direct monetary payment question. The Legislative Analyst Office is forecasting a budget deficit of $30 billion every year for the next several years. You've said that the reason you're not going to, for any budget spending requests for reparations is because of the deficit. So does that mean that you'll only fight for reparations and direct monetary payments when there's a surplus, or are there plans to make that happen even during deficit years?
Just to clarify, and I don't know if you wanted to respond to this as well, but just to clarify, we are operating within a budget deficit. That is a constraint. We have bills that have a fiscal component to them. So that is not the primary driver to our budget package. Part of it, as Dr. Weber stated, is about education to our community and to our colleagues. And so, but yes, the budget constraints are real. We recognize them and we have to operate within them, but it is not the primary driver. It's just a recognition that that is one of our constraints. And one of our primary constraints, really, I would say, is education. We regularly received, when the draft report came out in June of 2022, we were at a budget surplus. And we had colleagues and community members calling us saying, why California? When people think about harm against Black individuals, they think about the South. When they think about violence, they think about the South. When they think about discrimination, they think about the South. When they think about racism, they think about the South. That all of that happens right here in California. And it is time that we educate everyone about that. The Reparations Task Force did an amazing job of documenting all of this within the report, and we encourage everyone, including our colleagues, to read it. We are now moving towards implementation, and it will absolutely take some time, and we'll continue to do that work and continue to bring the community along with us. Thank you. Here, and then I think you're our last. Did I say? No, you're last.
Senator Bradford, you had a bill that would create a state agency to kind of oversee these implementations. I'm wondering, just given how hard it is to create an agency, and how necessary is it to have this to put these proposals in place?
I think it's very important. It wasn't hard to create the tribal affairs for our Native American brothers and sisters, so why should it be any harder for creating these agencies for African Americans? We've done it before, examples as I stated. So I think it's time for us to step up and have this agency to oversee. We had an agency in 1865, it was called the Freedmen Bureau, that was responsible for the implementation of reparations. And so we need an agency, whether it's in complement to what's already existing. We're not trying to recreate the wheel, but we know we need infrastructure. We need government oversight to do this.
Thank you. Last question.
All right, thank you. Quick question. So are any of these bills based on lineage-based reparations? And if so, which bills would that be?
Are any of the bills, say it again?
Are any of the bills based on lineage-based reparations?
Oh, you mean on African and American descent?
Yeah.
Oh, there is one bill that calls specifically out, and that is from Assemblymember Mike Gibson, and it's AB 2862. That one has a direct relation to African descent. All of the other bills deal with, they are absolutely recommendations from the task force, but they primarily deal with issues that disproportionately impact African Americans or those from African descent or Black Californians.
Have you had a discussion with focusing on McGuire?
We do have to go, but I will just note that we have had a great working collaborative relationship with what we call the Big Three, our governor, our speaker, Rob Rivas, and Senate Pro Tem McGuire. Thank you.